Good morning and welcome to The Crawl, the show where we break down the future of search, brand authority, and everything else AI is rewriting about digital marketing. I'm Tristan Harris, your host, and today we're discussing generative AI versus assistant AI and why you shouldn't always rely on AI. Blessing Platinum Williams is a self-taught software developer and the founder of Tonely AI with a deep passion for sociology and psychology. Growing up, she was repeatedly told she was less than, words that became a self-fulfilling prophecy for years. After more than 80 hours of therapy and a long journey rebuilding self-belief, she came to understand how deeply language can shape a person's life. That realization led her to create Tonely AI, a privacy-first tone detection tool she built herself over 11 months, generating the data needed to recognize patterns like control and emotional manipulation. Tonely runs fully on device, never reading or storing conversations, because for Blessing, protecting people's words is as important as helping them reflect on them. She also holds a law degree, which only reinforced her core belief: every single word matters. We can't wait to dive deeper into Blessing's background and her thought process around generative AI versus assistant AI. So please join me in welcoming Blessing to the show. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, everyone. That's a great introduction. Thank you.
I always ask, it's got to be a little strange to have, your accomplishments read back to you.
Yeah,
Um,
it's a
I
bit cringe, to be honest, but it's fine.
I would feel the same way.
Yeah.
I would 100% feel the same way. But we have people that too are like, yeah, you know what? I did do that. You're right. And it's always interesting.
Yeah.
So for anybody who's new to this topic of conversation, how would you define generative AI versus assistant AI, just in plain English?
Okay. So everyone knows about ChatGPT. So generative AI is basically like your ChatGPTs, your Geminis, and then you've got assistant AI, which is more or less like, maybe you should do this. It won't necessarily tell you how to do it. It might give you a breakdown, but it won't do it for you. So it's more of an assistant and it helps you with whatever task it is. So it's more of a specific thing. So most assistant AIs are niche. So they're built for purpose instead of a general product like ChatGPT or Gemini.
So that's really interesting, and it brings back a conversation I had with a previous guest here who was talking about the history of AI. One of the very first AI bots, so to speak, was a platform where they got a senior engineer at a factory to basically just download all of his information into a computer. And this was before computers were even user friendly. And then other people after he left were able to kind of query that database and figure out what they need to do, kind of deal, right? So not true AI as we think about it today, but definitely kind of that precursor to agentic, I need this very specific thing, niche thing.
Yeah, and I think that because we've been using ChatGPT and Gemini, I think it makes those assistant AIs look like it's not necessarily real AI, but they have been trained as well in a particular subject. So it is still AI. It's just a different type of AI. So yeah, so you have they kind of serve different purposes, but I kind of have a personal opinion about certain types of AI, even though I do use them. But yeah.
Yeah, that's I think we all have opinions on certain portions of AI. I think that too it's the difference between more broad and more focused. Like you mentioned, they're very niche specific, and that can be a strength, right? So having a custom made tool, like, yeah, you could hammer a nail in with a wrench, but wouldn't you rather use a hammer? So having a tool
Exactly.
specifically built for the task at hand or the job at hand is is very, very, very useful.
Exactly. And the thing is as well, when I talk about generative AI versus assistant AI, I do tend to focus a lot on the potential of assistant AI being on device instead of, taking up all this data space and land and using up all our clean water. So I so I tend to, even though assistant AI can still use up all our clean water and land, they don't actually have to, because technically they're just doing way too much with, you know, something that can be specific and on
Mhm.
device without, you know, just processing or using all our electricity, using all our
Yeah.
clean water, all our good land. So yeah.
Yeah, you don't really need to, build a giant data center and run all of that for very specific tasks, especially if
Exactly.
that knowledge base can live in app or on device.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
that's a very good point. I know that a lot of our listeners and a lot of people following the AI discussion, have concerns about the
Environment.
environmental impact and everything for this. So
Yeah.
that's actually a very good point. Is when you can get this down to on device and run it at a device layer, you're no longer, necessarily having to go out and waste a lot of those resources.
Exactly. And the thing is with generative AI, so for example, let's think of ChatGPT, right? It's not perfect. So so they're using up again, I know they're using up all that land, all that water, all of that, only for it to not be perfect. It's pretty close to perfect. Nothing can be perfect, but if it was more of a specific tool, then let's say there was like a news AI. I'm just using that example. Legal AI. Legal AI, they can use, American legal AI, they can perhaps download all the legal precedent and all of that. And then you can then query it for the relevant, you know, law or whatever, So it will be useful in that sense, and it will most likely be more accurate because it would have all that information there, and then it can say, because based on all this information, this case could potentially be won because of this. That's how that model has perhaps learned, is learned through all of the previous cases.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a very good point. And, thank you for localizing it for the American audience. On the UK side, if you had a barrister that was looking to, pull all case law around a certain thing, getting ready for a court date, that doesn't necessarily need to be queried live every single time that
Have not.
you utilize it. That can be something that is updated regularly. But a lot of law and a lot of legal precedent goes back a long way, and you would know
Exactly.
much better than me. So
Yeah.
um, I try to stay away from lawyers as much as possible.
For obvious reasons. I'm not necessarily a lawyer. Obviously, I've got a commercial law degree. Um, it's been very useful throughout my life. But I haven't practiced as a lawyer. I've just used it for things like trademarking and things like that. Stuff that to save money, so I don't have to hire a lawyer because I've got that info. But yeah,
You,
it makes sense for if there were, let's say there was like an AI model built specifically for UK law, and it was updated regularly. So it was, when perhaps monthly or, whatever, quarterly updated. And then it would be able to say, based on this law, based on this precedent, then there's a bigger chance that this case can be won based on these, just the history, basically. So it makes more sense to do something like that instead of using chat or, for example, Microsoft Copilot, which I'm not sure if you
yeah,
heard of the recent case whereby a police chief actually had to resign because he used
I did
Microsoft
not.
Copilot. Yeah, so he used Microsoft Copilot to decide on whether he was going to allow some people to come to a football match, I believe. Um, and it
Doesn't
was
feel like something you should leave up to Copilot.
but this is the thing, they
Yeah.
rely on AI. They think it's perfect. It's not perfect.
I think that most people need to realize that it's amazing and a lot of the things it can do are awesome. It's still, in the grand scheme of technology, relatively early.
Early,
Yeah.
exactly. It's very
So
early.
I think, one of the things I mention once in a while on this podcast a friend of mine and one of our first guests, he was just messing around and trying to figure out like how can I get ChatGPT to be confidently incorrect. And he figured out what Unicode library they use and what emojis they were able to display. And he found one that it didn't have. And he was like, could you give me an emoji of a seahorse? And it showed an emoji of a horse and was like, here you go. Here's your seahorse. And it's like, well, not quite. Try again. And it went down. And eventually it just ended up being like ASCII art,
Mm,
and it was like, this is the best I can do. I'm sorry. But that portion of it being kind of confidently incorrect has been brought up by a lot of guests is, you need to cross your T's and dot your I's, and you need to check
100%.
its work because it might not be, or it might be using a data source that's incorrect. So
Yeah. Because it's
it's
pulling from everything. All of
Mhm.
us are its unpaid interns, right? Everything that we put into ChatGPT, Gemini, everything, it's what it's using to train. So even if I'm loud and wrong, ChatGPT might learn all of that and it'll give it to
Blessing
something else.
seems confident. It seems like she knows what she's talking about. Let's use that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's just how it is, unfortunately, there's going to be a lot of cases like that police chief who, unfortunately, might lose his job because he's heavily relied on AI, and it's unfortunate, but it is in its early days. Just like you said, I've built my own AI model, and I've had to build the data from scratch. It's not perfect at all, and I say that, but there are places where it is pretty perfect. Um, you know, um, but I feel like I had to make sure that people know, like, look, Tonally is not perfect, so please make sure that you check you cross check it, but it is pretty perfect close. It's close in loads of things because it allowed me to be very specific. It's a niche product. I was able to focus specifically on those categories instead of, oh, let's just get everything, you know.
Yeah. I think that that's a really good, I keep talking about things that we've mentioned before on this podcast. One of the themes I keep hearing come up is when you're getting into it, niche down, like really try to get specific with what you're trying to do because that will help you. One, if it's something you know and you know well, it'll help you kind of do that cross checking. And two, you get to that point where you're addressing a specific need and not going too broad, which I think is another issue that pops up. But
Yeah, and it's still very much needed. I think
yeah.
everyone assumes that we all need another chatbot. I think they are very useful. But at the same time, I think that if there's a way that we don't all have to be their unpaid interns, if there's a way that our privacy can actually be prioritized, if there's a way that they can perhaps, create smaller versions of their product that will be on device, more edge AI, just all on device that is more safer, private. I feel like if they can do that, if they can transition to that, that would probably be a better that would be I think most users would be a bit more comfortable with that because I know every time I give ChatGPT or Gemini something, I know I'm basically training the model,
Mhm.
and my information is definitely not private.
Nope. Nothing about it is. That's a really good point, and I think that most people too would just find it more convenient to use like a tool instead of having to go kind of cobble the tool together or sift through a lot of things that they might not necessarily have the time to do. Where if it's a
Yeah,
tool on your phone, on your computer, you simply have to open it and use it. I mean,
yeah,
that makes it simple. It gets it into people's hands without a lot of the kind of learning curve that we
yeah.
see.
It also makes it more inclusive because there are places all over the world that their internet connection is not that great. If your internet is a bit spotty, I'm pretty sure you've had moments when you're waiting for a response from ChatGPT and you're like,
Oh
oh,
yes. Yeah, exactly. And that's another great point that I hadn't considered either. The inclusivity. I mean, it's one thing to be able to download, an app or kind of a knowledge base and use it offline. And it's another entirely to, have to always be connected.
yeah.
And there's a lot of places out there that that's not feasible or possible.
Yeah, a lot of places. And so because of that, that puts them at a disadvantage because if all of us are using, AI, generative AI to kind of elevate ourselves, build things or, learn things or whatever.
Yeah.
And then these places all over the world have no access to regular internet. They have to go to perhaps like a internet cafe to have access to the internet, or whatever. Then it puts them at an extreme disadvantage. Whereas if they created more, perhaps smaller models, so for example, teaching models, if they had a teaching generative AI, whatever, that was an on-device thing, or if there's just smaller, because these companies have the resources to do it, so they should
Yeah.
do it and make it more inclusive. We know that these companies are investing a lot of money into land, a lot of money into all of this stuff, so they can invest that same type of money into perhaps creating smaller models that will be more inclusive for communities that don't have access to internet.
That's a fantastic point. I'm glad that you called it out.
Mm.
It almost serves to widen the gap between, where we are versus, areas that don't have that access. And I wonder how hard it would be to build an offline mode that updates when you want to update it and, has a relatively simple amount of things. Now, I don't know the tech behind how that would actually work. So maybe it
Well,
wouldn't, but
I think it's possible. If they were to, it's a matter of them making smaller models and they have to make them specific. So, for example, people are using AI to code, right? So they can create coding models that will be that they train the model and they'll then be on the user's device. Once they've downloaded it, the the AI could either be in the in store it, so they can have like cloud store, so they can do that. Let's just say, for example, Firebase, yeah, storage. So Firebase storage is kind of like a server base or whatever.
yeah,
They can do that. So once the user downloads the AI model or the app, then they automatically have access. Once they've like, obviously paid for subscription. Let's say they've paid for subscription. Now it gives them the opportunity to have access to that on-device AI model. So if they did something like that, that's a very specific need.
mhm,
So, and I know that coding, for example, even though AI is obviously going to take over at some point, but coding is a tool that is useful, and a lot of communities are growing with that skill. So if
yeah,
you're able to learn how to code, then you're able to perhaps provide for your family and all this type of stuff. So
yeah,
if you have access to the code, then that in itself is something that could potentially be huge. Just an AI model that could be on the device and it's just for coding. They don't have
yeah.
to have the internet for it. And now all of a sudden they are able to build things and hopefully take their families out of poverty and things like that.
Yeah, and if it was something like Claude Code where you download it and you say, load these libraries and you go select the programming language, so it doesn't
Yeah,
have to include everything that you're not looking
exactly.
for, and yeah, that would be fantastic.
And it doesn't have to, we don't need everything. Like, I
Yeah,
think that's the thing. Like, if you want to have a writing model, then they can create like a specific writing model that can be on device. And if people are really interested in writing, because the thing is, we're all into different things. So what
yeah.
you use AI for is different to what I use AI for. And if they created one specifically for, for example, they've got the image ones, the image
Oh,
generators.
like Midjourney and some
Yeah,
of those, yeah.
those honestly do not need to be. They can definitely be on device.
Oh,
I'm
yeah,
gonna be honest
for
with you.
sure. Yeah,
They can,
I
100%.
I feel the same way, just load the library and you're good,
Just
like
just do that. It is
yeah,
there's no there's no need for it to just like, they don't need to make sure they don't need to be everything to everyone. They can have specific niches, and these companies have the resources to do that, allowing it to be more inclusive, 1. 2, it would actually save more water, so it would actually be more environmentally
mhm,
friendly, because if they create smaller models, smaller versions, then they don't have to rely on the data centers as
yeah,
much.
yeah,
And then if
and
they don't have to rely on the data centers, then they don't have to take up all our clean water and
and also
electricity.
and also that's like a cost save for them too, like,
Exactly.
it seems like a no-brainer to do to get to that point, and I think this ties back into the earlier conversation of we're so early into this, technology that it's not being, like, I don't think that OpenAI are thinking about how can we optimize this from, from an environmental impact standpoint, energy usage. How can we optimize this for, an individual, that might be somewhere else in the world and all of that. I think that we'll get to that point, but it's so early, right? Like it makes sense to get to that point because it's cost save for them.
I don't
So
know if we will though, because I know this sounds very pessimistic, but these companies are investing like 40 billion into land
yeah,
for the data centers. If they've invested that much into the data center,
why would
then
they move away from
why
it?
would they move away from it?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. I think that at some point somebody will do a cost benefit analysis maybe and
Yeah,
hopefully it moves away from it, but
yeah. Because
yeah,
the thing is
it's
they
hard to
could
know.
save that 40 billion
Mhm.
and put it into creating smaller models that will be more inclusive and environmentally friendly. And then that way they would save more money. They'll probably actually make more money, and then they will be able to reach a wider audience as well.
That also makes it seem like it's kind of ripe for disruption because if somebody can go in there at a much more efficient way of doing it, then they would
I'm
by
going
proxy take over.
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest with you. Just having this conversation has inspired me, and I might start just creating my own little micro models myself.
When you were talking about the lawyer one earlier, I was gonna say, you know what? Just don't forget that I helped you when this thing blows up. Don't forget we had this conversation.
Because I'm thinking after having this conversation, I was like, wait a minute, you know how to build models.
Yeah, you can do this.
You can
Actually,
do
wait a
this.
second. That
I need to
makes perfect
focus because
sense.
this is just how my brain works. And what will happen is I'll end up spending all that time building all these extra ones, and instead of focusing on what I'm really passionate about, which is obviously Tony.
Yeah.
But it's definitely food for thought. For sure.
So I want to get back to another question. So we talked a lot about what AI can do. What are some of the biggest misconceptions that people have about what generative AI can actually replace?
So I think, with regards to like, because obviously people are using it for therapy now, and we've
Yeah,
heard
which
that,
isn't
which
a
is
good
it's not good. It's not
no.
good. It's not good at all. And we've heard a lot of very tragic cases because people are using it
Yeah,
for therapy. So I think just to clear, just for the first thing is it is not going to replace your therapist. If you need therapy, get a therapist, an actual human, not a robot. The thing is, I think a lot of people are scared of AI taking their jobs. For example, I'm a software developer, and to be honest, I've kind of seen it in a different way. I'm just like, well, I guess I don't have to think that much. I'm just going to use AI. That's fine, because they need somebody who understands the logic behind the code.
absolutely.
If somebody, decides they're going to just build something. So, for example, I have got a lot of friends that say, "Oh, I've got an idea." I'm like, "Oh yeah, you can literally use AI to build it." And just because they don't have any technical understanding and whatever know-how, it's a bit of a roadblock for them.
Mhm.
So they
Yep.
can't do it. So they come to me and they ask me to build it, and I build it with AI. Still charge them the right amount. So I think that um, AI can't necessarily replace software developers yet. People are quite scared of that, but I think that like the co-pilots and the automation and stuff like that started way before the AI hype anyway.
Oh yeah, of course.
So I think that a lot of companies that sacked their employees because they thought AI was going to replace it, they are starting to hire them back now. Anyway, so we're starting to see, if you look at the press and stuff, there is an uptake in people getting hired back. They're looking for perhaps technical people, but they say with confidence using AI.
Yeah, and I think that's the big shift in something we're definitely seeing on the marketing side, right? Is how can we be more efficient and how can we utilize this as a tool to help us have greater reach, better results internally for ourselves, for our clients, if it makes sense to utilize it, and how can we become better than the sum of our parts by using this tool, right? And something that, as a leader at this company that I think is very highly of as a skill in the employees on my team is the ability to be an early adopter of that technology and use it to solve specific problems. So not use it to help you write your email to me or not use it to put together a two-page doc about, a competitor or something. How using it to solve specific problems and to help free the team up to be able to focus and spend time thinking at a higher level on strategy and performance. I think that that is the future of where, a lot of leaders are looking across my industry and across many others is, I'm not looking at this to replace my employees. I'm looking at this to make my employees better and
Yeah,
to free
efficient.
up their time to do more and to do more impactful, higher level things that, or more judgment calls or more creative or things that maybe necessarily AI doesn't do a great job of. So,
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, people are using it to replace things like, for example, I'm a prompt engineer as well. So companies come to me to just get things like images and videos. And that's because a while ago, a long, long time ago, when I was like 22, I had a magazine and I was like a photographic director. This is before I learned how to code, because I learned how to code when I was 30. So I used to direct photo shoots. So now, because I have that technical know-how and I know how to use AI, companies come to me to create and generate images and videos. Um, it's really sad because I used to work with a team,
yeah.
photographers, makeup artists, hairstylists, fashion stylists, and there's nothing like creating something out of nothing, right? You have that vision in your mind. As the art director, I would set it out as a mood board and I'd work individually with each person in the team. And I don't think, in my personal opinion, yes, AI can replace it because loads of companies have used it to do that. But I feel like it takes away from the experience and the the human element of things like photos, images, videos, whatever, you know, and that experience behind creating that photo. So I've got loads of videos, for example, when I was on set with my team. And if when I'm generating images for companies, there's no
Yeah.
team behind it. It's just me, obviously, and it's
So I
sad.
think I think something, and we've had a lot of guests on this show, and one of the main underlying themes that keeps coming back is the need, no matter what, and this is talking to guests across many different backgrounds, different focuses, different industries, the need to still maintain that human connection. And I think that there are some areas that from a societal standpoint, we're starting to see, a blowback from. And some of that is things like, you know, a fully generated AI ads or social media posts or things along those lines where people, they're coming, they're looking for that human connection. If you're a brand and you are selling, let's say, for example, you're McDonald's, right? And traditionally, people have a connection with food or stuff like that that is almost emotional based in a way. And when you're taking that out and you're just putting this layer of AI generated advertising between you two, like a lot of times, and this was blowback for I mentioned McDonald's specifically because there was a big blowback recently from one of their ad campaigns. It causes, negative reaction in the community and in your audience.
Distrust.
Yeah. And I think that that's something that, is this underlying theme across all these guests is AI is great. It's useful. It's definitely the way of the future. Don't sleep on it. But if you get to the point where you are trying to automate the human connection, you've gone too far.
Yep, yep. And that's why whenever you see like a video online, so for example, I watched a video and I sent it to my sister-in-law, and the first thing she said was, "I think this is AI." And the thing is, regardless of what that video had, like the content, because she thought it was AI, she disregarded it. She didn't want to
Yep.
see it.
Mhm.
And this is the thing, this is the growing sentiment now. Is this AI? That's the first question. Is this AI? Which
Yep.
means that people are starting to they might use it, but they don't necessarily want the big companies to use it, or they don't necessarily want the social media influencers to use it. They might use it for smaller tasks, but they don't want you to use it and publish it. Keep it to
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah. Like,
Basic
write me a script for a 1 minute long, the social media reel where I talk about X. Like, cool, and then personalize it. But to make all of it top to bottom,
Yeah.
yeah, that's gonna be iffy. And it ties
Yeah.
back to your earlier point about like, generative AI isn't a replacement for a therapist, right? And it's
It's not.
because
It's
it
not.
doesn't have that human connection, and also it doesn't have guardrails. So
Yeah.
you're getting, we've all seen the terrible news and all of that. So you get to a point where if you're automating away the human element of whatever it is, whether you're in sales and marketing or whether you're in creative or whether you're a big brand and you're trying to, I don't know, maybe cut costs on ad creatives,
Be
you've probably
efficient.
gone too
Yeah.
far. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that yeah, I feel like AI is great for automation, I think. But I think for replacing, for example, the photo shoots or the video, or, just imagine if we go to the cinema and we're watching a movie and we just realize, wait a minute, was that clip AI? No, you don't want that. Let's just hope it doesn't get to that point. But I do think it might might happen.
So, anecdotally, I don't know if you're into video games. There was a game that came out last year called Expedition 33, and it was amazingly well received. Everybody loved it, right? And it went up for a Game of the Year award that it should have won hands down, right? It was the best game of the year by far. And it came out that they had used AI to generate these little posters that were on a wall in the background as a placeholder, and they forgot
Oof.
to take it out post
Oof.
production. They updated it maybe 2 weeks later and took it out. But because they did that, there was this massive blowback against a game that is fantastic.
Yeah.
They have, and to their credit, the soundtrack is done by a full orchestra.
Yeah.
Like it really is incredible. But just that enough was enough to say like, hey, this is, maybe don't mess with the art.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe focus on areas that's important. It can
Yeah.
help with like, work tasks, but maybe don't kill the things that
Yeah.
we like.
And this is the thing, we want to protect those artists. We want to protect the musicians because it's good that they used an actual orchestra because they could have used AI. I've
Yeah.
just discovered Suno, which
Yeah.
is, oh my gosh, my husband and I are kind of obsessed with it. I'm not gonna lie, but they could have used AI to replace replace the orchestra, which is really bad. So whenever clients come to me for a for some photography or imagery, photography or videography through AI, the first thing I'm doing is convincing them to work with my excellent team because I know so many brilliant, talented people that are out of work, unfortunately, because people prefer to use AI.
Yeah.
So the first thing I'm doing is, by the way, I know a great photographer, I know a great stylist, I know, but but because of cost cutting and things like that, they prefer to use AI. But if their customers knew that they used I don't think it would be received well, just like that game that you used.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely. And I don't know if you can see in the camera view, and I know nobody listening to the podcast on Spotify or anything like that would be able to see, but I've got four guitars sitting next to me, a giant amplifier. I like to pretend to be a musician, is what I like to say. But yeah, when it comes to things like AI generated music, I have very strong opinions,
yeah.
right?
Oh,
And
my
I think
husband
most do.
is a producer and musician as well,
Oh wow.
and he is like, "What does this mean about music? What does this mean about music?" He was having a breakdown because he just discovered.
Yeah.
But he was like, "Okay, so he's been trying to find a nicer way to look at it, but." He did have a breakdown last week because we discovered.
Just tell him that this Yankee from across the pond told him, like, I have not found any of those models that can make a sound like anywhere near like what David Gilmour can do, for example, from Pink Floyd.
Mm.
Nobody can play a guitar like no AI can push through that emotion at that level. Like it's just not. I mean, it's an existential threat to music, but it's also, it's not necessarily a. I think again that's an area that we can outperform
Yeah,
AI.
100%,
Yeah.
because I feel like people, when it comes to music, right, people want to know what music is emotional.
Yeah.
Right. So if it was made by a robot, the robot obviously doesn't have emotions.
Mhm.
And sometimes you hear in a song, you can hear the pain in that artist, you can hear the joy,
Yes.
you can hear the love. It is emotional. So I feel like there's certain things, people are replacing. For example, I go to church and I've noticed that some of the sermons have definitely been ChatGPT produced.
Oof.
And it's really,
I
that's
don't know
not,
if I wouldn't like that.
I don't like it, because I feel like, it's not supposed to be from a robot. It's supposed to be
No,
spiritual.
from the heart. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's unfortunate that that's where we're
Yeah.
going. But I do think that eventually, we've noticed that people are saying, is this AI? There's going to come a time when people are going to be too scared to use it for those purposes because they know
Yeah.
that it's going to have a negative effect. People are not going to respond to it well.
Yeah, there's going to be that societally acceptable use of AI. And a lot of that are the tools that make life easier, the tools that help you at work and in business and, with your personal
Exactly.
life. And then there's going to be the like, things that aren't socially acceptable, like stop flooding my social media feed
With
with
these
AI
cat.
generated videos
Yeah.
or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I think that that'll be that will formulate, and it already is. We're already seeing,
It's
some firm
happening.
stances that are being taken. Um,
But you know what? That then goes back to the whole smaller models or the assistant AIs,
mhm,
because as soon these companies that are investing 40 billion into land and all of this stuff, they're going to probably realize that, okay, we can perhaps get away with making smaller models, saving money, all this type of
yep.
stuff, because a lot of it is commitments. They haven't necessarily spent it. They've committed, for example, Google or whatever have committed to spending certain amounts in Portugal, Germany, whatever for the
Mhm,
land. But then they can perhaps see that because people are not responding well to certain bits of AI, then they can create smaller models that are more useful, more private use, right? You
yeah.
can use it for work or, whatever, but it's not necessarily for public consumption.
Yeah, I think that's an absolutely great point. And I think that this whole conversation we just had for the last 15 minutes or so, which we kind of got a little off the rails, but I if somebody mentions music, there's no way I can't talk about it. I think that kind of brings me to the question of what are like the risks that people underestimate when they're pushing AI adoption. So, like for a leader in a business or, um, let's say somebody like in charge of an ad creative team or something like that. What are kind of the underlying risks from moving too quick and not stopping and thinking?
Well, I think you already said it in the question, right? If you're moving too fast, then there's always risk of error by
Mhm,
default. Just like that person who used Microsoft Pilot, he was moving too fast and now he's resigned. He's out of a job.
mhm,
You know, I think the risk is that people will think that they can, release things and create things quickly. Um, and then in hindsight they'll see that there was loads of errors. In hindsight they'll see that it wasn't exactly what they wanted because perhaps they didn't cross section it. They just released it exactly how the AI gave it to them.
mhm.
So instead of so I think that's the risk that there's going to be loads of errors, there's going to be loads of job loss, but from the top, because they've perhaps thought that they can be a bit hasty. The companies that are, for example, sacking people but now bringing them back, they had to learn the hard way.
Yep.
They had to learn the hard way. So I think that all of this is going to happen gradually, but I think right now there's that hype, it's the bubble, and it's going to pop.
Yeah, and that idea of moving too fast and kind of using it where maybe you shouldn't. I can't count the amount of times in a week I get an email or a document shared with me, and I'm like, yeah, this was ChatGPT. You didn't even reformat it,
Yeah.
and it is a very useful tool in a lot of cases. What they sent me was great, and it helped them put together a really well thought out email. But I also want to see what they think. I want to
Yeah.
see beyond the.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing about ChatGPT or any generative AI. It kind of neutralizes the way that people sound. So if you are, if you have quirks, like I know that prior to using any form of AI, my writing was riddled with quirks. And one of the things that I've now started to do when I do use AI, because obviously we still use it, is leave my quirks, please. Leave my quirks. I don't want it to sound like you. Leave my quirks. So when I
So So my quirks that almost all of my writing my entire life, I heavily use M dashes, and now I cannot because now I have had to adjust to sound very to remove them completely because of
people
you
think
know
it's chat when it's actually you.
yeah. So it was a little interesting, and it was just a habit I picked up during college, I
Yeah,
guess, of just using them way too much,
that's
and
so
then AI started
interesting.
doing it. Maybe they copied all my homework, who
Maybe,
knows?
maybe your homework was used as dating data for sure.
I hope not. It wasn't that good.
Well, I think that the neutralizing of text is actually the saddest part of it because you can tell
Yeah.
you let's say if I wrote an essay or anything, then it would say, okay, so this is how it sounds a bit more professional. But no, it was professional. I was able to write before you. Just make sure.
Yeah, you just, took some of the flavor out of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I think it's yeah, the neutralizing of text is people like we're not seeing how people traditionally would write. We want
Mhm.
to see personality. We want to see that human element of that text, or blog or whatever. And in fact, I'm guilty of this myself. I've actually used it to generate a blog, and I looked at it, and after publishing it, I felt sick to my stomach. I was like,
Yeah.
"Blessing, you know what? You need to make sure that you have time before you write anything, okay? And create
Yes.
it yourself." So yeah.
Yeah,
S
obviously being in marketing, we between our brands put out like, gosh, 14 to 16 blog posts a week.
Oh, wow.
Um, and we almost entirely use human writers for it. And
That's
part of
amazing.
part of the reason we do that is one, people can tell, but two, we are not trying to write about what was done a year ago and written a year ago that other people have talked about. We're trying to talk about something new, right? And we're trying to be thought leaders and do analysis and look into certain situations about how things like AI are reshaping the future and things like that. Whereas, it's not something you can necessarily rely on that on. But I'd be lying if I said we didn't use it to help us outline things here or there. But yeah, you can definitely you lose some of the human connection
Yeah,
again when you
yeah.
take content and you have it just purely run through the machine.
Yeah, I think what I've been doing lately, is I'd write exactly what I need, and I'll just say, "Check the punctuation, don't change
Mm.
anything, don't change how I sound, don't don't remove any of
Is
my
this
quirks."
grammatically correct? Yeah.
Yes, yes, but that's about it. But I think that, for the most part, for example, what I'm doing with Tonely, a lot of it stems from my background. A lot of it stems from, the pain that I
Mm.
experienced through harm and stuff like that. So, the AI can't write that pain. The AI
Yeah.
doesn't understand it. So whenever I'm working with people or sharing my story, it has to come from me. It's not something that yes, obviously it's an AI model and it's amazing or whatever, but the actual story behind it and the history behind it is
That's the human connection.
that's yeah,
And that's people won't look at it and say like, "Oh, I need this because of that." They'll look at it and say, "Hold on, like I have a similar problem as this person. I can commiserate with the pain point that they
yeah,
had, and if it was a solution for them, it could be a good solution for me, and all of that." So
yeah.
that's certainly, yeah. Speaking of Tonely, to kind of switch gears into your business, um, could you tell me more about it and how you came up with the idea? I know we kind of talked about it a little bit earlier, but I'd love to dig
Yeah.
in.
So it stems from my background. So as a child, I was considered an underachiever. And teachers would say I was stupid. Literal teachers will literally say I was stupid.
Oof.
And just people around me would say I was stupid. So that was internalized. And then it became a self-fulfilling prophecy. So I genuinely started to I was failing in a lot of aspects, but just because of the words that was planted, they were planted at such a young age. So then I went on to college. In college, I had some teachers that were positive instead of negative, and they were speaking life into me. So thinking about the correlation of negative words and thinking of how much impact the positive words had on me, Tonely kind of was born last year because of just reflection. I had a lot of time to reflect. And I wanted to make sure that people have the tools in place to not say harmful words. And the thing is, like, a lot of the time, people might say things without knowing. So Tony has been built with those people in mind, not necessarily the people that say, "No, I actually want to be angry." So,
Oh,
you know,
geez.
you know, there are some
Yeah.
people that I remember that I was kind of like testing it out with my immediate circle, and my friend was like, "By the way, Tony told me that this message that I was about to write was angry, but I wanted it to be angry." So I was like, "Good, good." so, so
I
for
I love it. I don't know that I would ever be like, if it warned me like, "Hey, you sound like you're pretty mad." I don't know if I'd be like, "Yeah, I want it to."
the thing
But
is, there are some people that might. This is the thing. Is like, but I built it with those people in mind that don't want to be angry, but they are. But if their message is saying you're coming across angry, perhaps you should, scale it back, or you're coming across sarcastic or manipulative, because we've managed to get it to be quite good at picking up emotional manipulation. So this is coming up a controlling, or it's coming up manipulative or narcissistic, you
Mhm.
know, things like that. I think it would help. And for the younger audience, we've managed to get this one pretty perfect, which is personal information. So it's 99% accurate with personal information. So if you're about to share your personal information, it would say, "This is private information. Are you sure you want to
Yeah,
share
you
this?"
don't share your PII if you
Yeah,
don't if
yeah.
you're not sure.
So the thing is that a lot of people aren't aware that if you say, I always go to the park after school, for example, sharing that bit of information is considered private information, because now somebody knows where you are
And when you're
and
there,
when you're
yeah,
there.
which can
So
be dangerous. Yeah.
yeah, very dangerous. So Tony hopefully would protect those people. Tell them, by the way, this is private, don't share that. So yeah,
That is an awesome use case. And, from my standpoint, it probably get more use out of making sure I'm not sounding like I'm too short with anybody or, my it's so difficult with text to get a tone across, right? And a lot of times if
exactly.
you're somebody like me that just absentmindedly replies to people, I've definitely had things taken the wrong way. Um, my wife can tell you that I'm terrible at conveying tone in text. So I think that can be really helpful, but the kind of protecting personal information, I think that is very, very awesome as well. Um,
Yeah.
we are coming up on time. So I do want to just kind of dive into a few things. So, first of all, thank you so much for joining us today,
Oh no,
Blessing.
thank you for having me.
I could talk to you all afternoon. I really enjoyed
Oh, thank
this.
you. Thank you.
Um, some of the things I love what you're doing with Tonely. And I
Thank
think the
you.
idea of really focused, you know, on device use cases for AI is probably good, where we're going to be in a year or two. I think
Yeah.
we'll start seeing that coming at a scale more than we have so far. Um, Before we close out, I always like to give my guests an opportunity to tell everybody where they can find them. Are you on social? Do you have, Tonely AI's website? Shout it all out.
Yes, thank you. So you can find Tonely on usetonely.ai. So Tonely is spelt Tonely, Tonely. So use tonely.ai. Um, and you can find me online. But my content is completely opposite to Tonely AI. It's just about, it's motivational because that's my story. So a lot of my content is just encouraging. So you can find me on Blessing Platinum Williams, and that's a bit of a long one, but that's my name. So, so that's how you can find me. I'm everywhere pretty much, just trying to encourage people as much as possible, and telling them specifically when they've dealt with depression or when they've felt, had imposter syndrome and things like that, trying to encourage people to just keep going and that they can do it. So yeah.
I love that. Thank you. And thank you so much again for joining us today. Everybody listening at home or at work or the office or in your car, if you like this episode, please make sure to hit follow, though not if you're listening in your car and driving. Leave a review. And as always, let us know what topics you'd like us to cover next. We're always looking to kind of expand what we're talking about here, and all the comments and feedback from you guys really helps. So thank you very much, Blessing, and we'll
Thank
see
you,
you all next
Tristan.
time.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.